All right, well, hello everyone. Happy Tuesday evening. We didn't do a live stream on Monday because it was Memorial Day, but we're here with you guys Tuesday night. I'm Jacob Winograd. I am the host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute, which is part of our Christians for Liberty network. If you're new to us, you can, of course, always find out more about us at libertarianchristians.com. Find all our podcasts, articles, including one I just released today. And I think the second of a couple articles we've written about why James Lindsay is wrong. And we also have cool merchandise, including these cool little rock glasses that have different podcast logos on them. So you can check all of that out. I'm joined tonight by our content director and fellow podcast host of the flagship Libertarian Christians podcast, Doug Stewart. Doug, how are you doing?
Good. Hey, Jacob. How you doing?
Yeah, I know. Long time no see. Now, what's funny is that 2 months ago, it was like I saw nothing but Cody, and now you and I are starting a trend. Where
we're starting a trend. Well, yeah. I'm glad you decided to upgrade. That's for sure. I had an interesting experience about an hour and a half ago when I clicked publish on your article about James Lindsay. I didn't finish reading it because I'm not the one who does the editorial. I was just in charge of kind of sending it off, and I have an interesting affinity for James Lindsay and some of his arguments. He's wrong about just war, probably, given that that's the article you're talking about. But it was an interesting thing for me to click publish on an article against James Lindsay. But that's okay, because even friendly fire is good. I mean, it's friendly for me. I don't know about you, but anyway, we're not here to talk about James Lindsay. We can do that.
No, we're not. That'll be a separate episode. I mean, I don't even hate James Lindsay. I just want him to be consistent, which is what that article is about. You guys can check it out.
Absolutely. That's very true.
On the website now. So I think it's worth a read. And then Cody Cook wrote one as well, which is not as good, but still give it a look if you want. We'll make Cody feel better about himself. Okay. But tonight we're here to talk about the debate that we went and saw last Wednesday now in New York City at the Soho Forum. It was my first time attending a Soho Forum debate. I know you've been to at least one other back when Carrie.
I was at Carrie's. Yep. December 2019. Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's that long ago. I mean, I feel like I just watched that yesterday.
Well, people are still talking about it, and so it's that. I mean, you'd think a debate isn't entirely always evergreen. I mean, you kind of hope it would be. The one that we went to is a little bit more like it was hedged in the sense of like in modern America. But Carrie's, I mean, people talk about it a lot, and like she still comes across people who found her debate, on their journey and understanding, the abortion debate, and so yeah, it feels fresh. It's good for her.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one that people, if you haven't watched it, go back and find it. There's been many good Soho debates in the past. I've usually caught them afterwards or watched the live streams. I still think my favorite one, even more than the one we watched and the one with Carrie, was the one with Scott Horton against Bill Kristol, because I just couldn't believe that Bill Kristol agreed to walk into a room and debate Scott Horton. I feel like he did zero research before he stepped into that one, which is crazy because he had plenty of time because he got rescheduled to reconsider. But we went there. We spent the day in New York City. Went up there early, hung out. We recorded some shorts, which I haven't uploaded to YouTube yet, but I'll be probably releasing those in the next few days. A couple, just silly walking around town and reacting to things that we saw. But we also decided that'd be fun to record our pre-debate thoughts. And then when we did this live stream, to talk about our pre-debate thoughts post-debate and kind of see if our expectations and predictions came to pass or not. So Without further ado, I will go ahead and play that clip for you guys now. 3. Hello, everyone. We are here in New York City. I'm here with Doug Stewart, and we're a couple hours away, less than a couple hours away because we had to do a retake, for the Soho Forum debate between Dave Smith and Alex, and I still can't remember his last name.
Nowrasteh.
Nowrasteh. It doesn't matter how many takes.
Institute.
Yes.
Dave Smith is from, well, where?
New
Not
York.
New York.
Not anymore. No, now he's a filthy immigrant, but he's been invited here, so it's okay.
Okay, all right.
No, but yeah, we're here to watch this debate between Dave and Alex on the topic of immigration, which it's always been a divisive one within libertarian circles, even more so as of late since Trump was elected in 2020 and in 2024 and ran on kind of a very large referendum on the immigration issue, because you had him and Harris duking it out to see which one of them was instead of being who's tougher on crime, it's who's tougher on who supported the most people.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and it also doesn't help that Trump deliberately appealed to libertarians for other reasons.
Yes.
Not the ones that libertarians are, like on immigration. He didn't appeal to them on those grounds, but now you have libertarians, including people like Dave Smith, who voted for Trump, kind of said he regretted it, but maybe not on this issue based on the debate. I don't know. Yeah. I think what'll be interesting about this debate, aside from the honking horns in our video, it's okay. We're in New York, like we said. I think what's interesting about this debate is going to be that this has been sort of brewing for quite a while within libertarianism. I think it was Dave and Alex sort of interacted a little bit back when X was actually Twitter. So we're a few years away from this actually still grinding the gears within libertarianism in a debate. So as Cody Cook calls you, the bordertarian of the LCI team in the Christians for Liberty Network, what are you hoping to get out of this debate? I mean, are you on Dave's side? Where are you?
That's a good question. I mean, I was actually kind of like the one who really pushed for us to come and attend and watch and cover this because I'm the fence sitter, ironically, to use a more border pun.
Okay, I got it.
On this issue, because I am very sympathetic to the concerns of people like Dave about how an open border or fluid border in a nation state, especially with a welfare state, can be detrimental to liberty and to social cohesion, and have outcomes that aren't conducive towards perhaps shrinking the state back. But on the other hand, this specific debate resolution as
restrictions on,
I think, is kind of a Herculean task for Dave to try to accomplish, because let
me help you out there, George W. Bush. It's Herculean.
Herculean, thank you. Herculean task.
Yeah.
Rolling a boulder. It's a bigger boulder uphill now to roll for Dave, because it's not just about immigration broadly speaking, but the debate resolution says for peaceful and healthy migrants,
That's
which is a big distinction.
Yeah, it is, because he can't just say, well, because of these specifically horrendous things like drug trafficking and so forth, which again we would go back to, we'll end of the drug war. Then you don't have that, but you have the clause in the resolution that it's also peaceful. So by definition, in this resolution, there is an inclusivity for peaceful people to cross borders, which isn't very libertarian on its face. Now, it'll be interesting to see how Dave defends that part of it. It'll be interesting to see how Alex actually responds to some of his, like, here's why we can deviate for a little while, or for a temporary period, or here's a carve out for why the state can be involved. So do you have any predictions on what we might see tonight?
Well, I mean, what I hope we don't see is two ships passing, because I think Dave's approaching this from a very sort of like theoretical, sort of first principles. Does libertarianism force us to accept open immigration, or can we view the nation state as an extension of the property of the taxpayers, and do they have a right to exclude? And I think Alex is going to approach it from more of a looking at statistics of crime, statistics of immigrants on welfare, and how they contribute to the economy and pay taxes and things like that. But I hope that each of them is able to clash with the other's core argument, because I think that they are well suited to try to, represent the two different camps within the liberty movement on this issue. So I'm my prediction. I'd like to ask you that question back as well. Like, do you have an inkling about who you think, has the upper hand? Who's going to win? If you were going to call it right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going. You're right. It's a little uphill battle for Dave. And Alex has the sort of tradition of libertarian movement and position as being stock and trade, open borders, and that the ill that comes from that is more of a law enforcement issue as opposed to a border issue, which is, of course, not the position the Trump administration takes. It's honestly not the position any president typically takes. Biden administration was a weird anomaly for a handful of reasons. So Alex is going to have a lot of encyclopedic knowledge. Encyclopedic. See, we both can't pronounce things in New York. It must be the air.
Yes.
But the encyclopedic knowledge of Alex Nowrasteh and people like Brian Kaplan in terms of the statistics is pretty remarkable. And I think Dave's going to have to battle with some of that. And I'm sure he's studied up on this and knows the kinds of things that they're going to say. And so he might have really good counterpoints to it, which I'm actually interested in seeing, because, you can talk about all the data we want and be like, oh, well, wow, it seems like immigration is like a really, really great thing. But maybe there's something we're not thinking of that Dave can bring up.
Exactly. I think Dave, that's what I hope Alex can respond to on the other side. Like, I hope Dave can address those statistics and then offer a meaningful explanation for why maybe, in his view, which I'm sympathetic to, that maybe the statistics aren't telling the whole story here.
Yeah.
Right? That maybe there's like, I guess like a, Hayekian sense that there's like second and third order consequences that don't exactly bear out in just the bare data. So as much as I think the proposition doesn't help Dave's a very experienced debater, so I wouldn't necessarily root against him. But what do you think the focus of the debate will be in terms of like the if you were going to say like there's one specific issue that's going to determine the outcome within that debate?
Yeah. I think it's going to be convincing a largely libertarian crowd, or people who are already on somewhat would be on Alex's side, so I guess they would be in the negative, to be told here's an acceptable way to deviate from what is a libertarian norm.
Right.
The word open borders right now kind of has the stigma of being Biden leftist. It's a leftist agenda to fill America with left-leaning voters or something like that. Elon Musk even was talking about that last year, and it's like, oh, really? Maybe that's true. I don't know, but that is the stigma that it has, and yet it's still a libertarian view that people and things should be free to cross borders, and so it's going to kind of hinge, I believe, on that. Can people be convinced whether or not there's an acceptable deviation right now in our situation?
Right. No, I think that's perfect, because I'm someone who kind of part of my reason for fence sitting is because I see the concerns, but often the proposals themselves don't seem to match, they're not libertarian means towards addressing the concerns of open borders. And then especially then what the administration that's currently in charge is doing is so far, and even Dave would agree, sorry, the birds are spying on us again.
Yes, I don't think the camera can see. Oh, there it is.
I think even Dave would agree that the way the administration is currently pursuing immigration control is like the worst possible way to do it from multiple angles. So,
I have a comment about your ships passing in the night, because that's a frustrating experience to watch in a debate, because you're like, well, wait, you guys need to debate each other, not debate past each other. On the other hand, because we're in this podcast-to-stand environment where both Alex and Dave are on shows or have their own shows, there's going to be a lot of chatter that we talk about afterward. And so, I mean, do you think that's going to play out better? Because even if they do pass one another, you're going to see Dave on a podcast talking about how Alex talked past him, and you might hear interviews with Alex. I mean, do you think that's actually a benefit to kind of the world we live in? That's such a cliche phrase.
No, I think that is a benefit, and on that front, I can say that I have one prediction, which I know is true, that after this debate, everyone online who is a libertarian will continue to debate endlessly and disagree on this issue, right?
Yeah, but we have an advantage, though. We have been to the debate.
We have been there, that's right. Well, not yet. We haven't been there yet, but in the future...
Yes, because we're recording this before.
So what we'll do is turn it over to those of you watching in the future, to future us, who have already been there, about how this debate went. Where did we go? There we go. Now we're back. Yes, we have time traveled now from the past to the future. Not really time. I guess it is.
I was gonna say, where have we been?
If you think about it, just living is time travel, right? You were traveling through time. But anyway, dumb joke.
We are
aside.
traveling through space, also.
True, exactly. So we went to the I don't know, what do we call New York these days? It's not the pit of evil of America, but it's maybe the armpit of America or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a joke in there. But we went there, we made it back, we saw the debate. You've seen our pre-debate thoughts and predictions. What do you think in terms of like how much clash there was? I'm of like two minds of this, where I think there was a lot of clash, and yet also I feel like the most fundamental issue didn't quite get tapped on, although they got close.
Yeah. I don't feel like there were ships passing through the night as we were sort of not hoping, as we were predicting could happen. I think the topics that people hit on, that the debaters hit on, they were hitting at them from different angles. They were talking about, like, there was this argument about, like, well, what's the libertarian standpoint? And Dave wants to go at it from the voluntarist angle, like that the language of being voluntary, which I kind of have problems with, which we'll kind of talk about here. And then Alex was coming at it from like a property rights. The government has no right to tell you what to do with your own body, kind of, and where you go, as long as you're peaceful argument. And on the one hand, it's like, well, wait, what? Both of those are in some ways libertarian starting points for people to talk about libertarianism, but from a first principles and ethics and rights sort of question, I think that's where people who are thinking about, but what is the libertarian position, would walk away with thinking, well, it sounds like there's two, even though they're actually not incompatible. It just seems like they were in the conversation, in the debate.
Yeah, no, you bring up this. Actually, I have clips for this because they had very different, like in their opening arguments, you could see right away the juxtaposition of their starting points. And so I want to play a couple clips from each of their opening statements, which will kind of highlight what we're talking about here, and then we can kind of react to those as they're fresh in our head. So this is from Dave's right here.
Restrictions on immigration, or at least in some categories. So I would start with this, something that kind of everybody in the room knows already, but really the foundational principle of libertarianism is all orbits around voluntarism, voluntary exchanges. Now, people will start at different starting points, but basically that's what it is to be a libertarian, is to believe in even things like property rights, the non-aggression principle. All of them are essentially built around the idea that we prefer voluntary exchange and we reject coercion or aggression. And there are different types of libertarians who are libertarians for different reasons, some more radical than others, but that kind of is the centerpiece of what you're arguing for. If you're arguing for a libertarian society, you're arguing for more voluntary exchanges and less coercion. And if that's your starting point, and then your end point is supporting a policy that you would have to support in order to reject this resolution, that would essentially be saying you are going to drastically change almost every aspect of our society against the will of almost all of the people who live here. I would humbly suggest you've messed up somewhere along the line. Like if your kid brought you their homework and their starting point was everything should be voluntarily, every exchange should be voluntary, and their end point was I am going to force on hundreds of millions of people their nation to be changed radically in almost every area you could imagine, culturally, politically, religiously, all types of different areas. If that is your end point, I think it's worth re-examining how you got there. And I'm saying here that, again, if you look at where the American people are, there are.
That was from Dave's opening statement, which was again, as you alluded to, he was kind of, steeping it more in voluntarism, which is funny. There's a funny anecdote to this, but first I want to play, in the interest of fairness here, before we talk about both of these things, I want to play the segment I have from Alex's opening statement, which is sort of the, him explaining his foundation for his argument. So go ahead and bring that up.
Dave is defending the resolution, quote, "Government restrictions on the immigration of peaceful and healthy people make sense from a libertarian standpoint, especially in present-day America," unquote. That resolution is nonsensical from a libertarian position. Dave would see it clearly if you were asked to support resolutions with a one-word difference, like, quote, "Government restrictions on the private property or drug use or gun ownership of peaceful and healthy people make sense from a libertarian standpoint, especially in present-day America." But he doesn't see it when it comes to immigration. Every strand of libertarian thought, from natural rights theory to ethical intuitionism and consequentialism, requires free movement, because immigration laws are government rules that attack our rights and restrict peaceful, voluntary exchange. Government restrictions on the immigration of peaceful and healthy people violates every strand of libertarian thought. Immigration laws are government regulations enforced by the state. We're not talking about trespassers on private property. We're talking about government laws and regulations that prevent you, all of you, from using your property as you see fit and from voluntarily interacting with others.
I keep forgetting to unmute myself. As we see there's that juxtaposition we talked about, where for Dave, he mentions property rights, but he really grounds his argument in voluntary association. And then the flip side is Alex is saying, yeah, voluntary association is right, but really comes down to property rights and what we do with our property. It's really ironic because I've had many debates with Cody, and I'm more on like sympathetic to Dave here. And but I also like Alex, and Cody's probably more sympathetic to Alex. But what's funny is that I have the different, like I usually am the one starting with property rights, and Cody's like, well, I just care about voluntarism. So I just think it's funny that like those things don't quite map on neatly. We have a few super chats I want to read quick, just because it's the right thing to do. Don Juan Plagueis is 0 said there's 3 immigration stances in libertarianism. Doug, do you know this is like a pop quiz?
Is this a quiz?
Yes.
I reject the premise of the question.
Oh no. I mean,
there's my cards on the table.
I mean, the way
I guess a libertarian can hold 3 stances, but I don't know.
I think the way he's saying it, maybe I'm wrong. He can correct me if I'm wrong. I think what he means is that you can be that there's open borders, there's closed borders, and then like what ANCAPs will often say is that really the only legitimate borders are private property borders. So
okay.
So he also said that Dave Smith lost this one really bad. I disagree. I think it was actually a rather close debate. I'm sympathetic. I would say maybe Dave had.
Officially he did win.
Did
by the rules of the game.
By the rules. I also think here's the funny thing about debate, because, and I have a background in speech and debate. You can win a debate and like be wrong on the issues, and even win a debate and maybe not have the best command of the issue. But debates are won not just on the facts on the ground, but like which points get responded to and which ones don't. And I voted for Dave, not even just on the issues, but just that I thought we'll get to this, that there was a fundamental argument that Dave had that I felt like Alex got close to touching, but didn't quite touch and address. And I was like, like if Alex had given a slam dunk response, that would have perhaps, tipped it for me. But anyway, Don, you also made one more super chat here. Appreciate the super chats, brother. This isn't quite on subject. He's talking about Andrew Wilson.
This is how you buy your way into a conversation that we're not having.
If you want,
no offense.
My latest episode of the Biblical Anarchy podcast, well, it depends when you're watching this, because I have one coming out tomorrow. Episode 97 of the Biblical Anarchy podcast is me revisiting my debate with Andrew Wilson and using it as a foil to talk about Christian nationalism today. So I'll just do a shameless plug there. Don said I was right, though, that those are the 3 different positions. But Norm says ask 10 different libertarians for their opinions on borders and you'll get 11. That's also true. So, all right. So now that we've done all the live stream comment.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on you kind of relaying your cards on the table? I think hinting at you kind of side more with Alex's framing here. Why is that?
Well, I think the crucial question is, what are governments allowed to do to individuals? And I don't feel like Dave dealt with the question as if libertarians thought individualistically. It seemed like he made a very big argument, despite saying, I'm not making a democratic argument. I mean, if you have to preface it with that, you kind of are. But it felt to me like he was making an argument from this whole idea of like will of the people, forcing a nation to be changed radically. That's not libertarian language. I mean, you can talk like that as a libertarian, but you're not arguing from libertarian principles. You're arguing from. I don't want to say Dave's arguing from a collectivist principle, because I don't think he wants to do that. I don't think he's trying to do that. I know he's an individualist, so I know. I understand where he's coming from, but that's the kind of language that makes this. Makes us kind of slide into a way to justify something that isn't actually libertarian in my view. And so I think the reason I sided with Alex in the beginning. So I didn't do him any favors by voting no on the resolution and then voting no on the resolution after the debate, because I didn't change my vote, which is sort of the rules. But Alex's approach by talking about it, like, what's the government allowed to do? Is the government allowed to tell a person that they can't hire another person just based on geography? Is the government allowed to tell, one other person, you can't cross this arbitrary line because we just don't want you to until you prove otherwise? And I think that's where Alex's stronger points came out in the debate. I'll leave those on the table for now.
So for me, it's a both and. I think you sometimes, depending on what we're talking about, is a matter of the emphasis we're going to have, because I ultimately, as an ANCAP, do like to really stake my ground in the propertarian sort of argument, right? That all rights are property rights. But I think the reason why I care about property rights so much, and I think they're so fundamental, is that I think a lot of people have made this argument, but Rothbard and Hoppe are the ones who I learned it from most succinctly or clearly, is that if the idea of libertarianism is conflict avoidance, which is another thing that I don't know that they necessarily touched on enough, but that's kind of another foundation, I think, for so we have social cooperation, and part of social cooperation is conflict avoidance or conflict resolution. Mm-hmm. And the best way to maintain voluntary interactions, peaceful interactions, social cooperation, is to have things clearly delineated along the norms of private property. Because when we get into the realm of public property, which is kind of what this debate kind of became about, what do we do with public property? Public property gets messy because it doesn't quite obey the clear distinctions and norms of private property. But when everything's privately owned, ruling on it on conflicts gets easy, because you just go, well, who owns it? They own it. They decide, as long as they're not using their property to hurt someone else.
Yeah.
So I kind of agree with Alex in a sense that it's about property rights, but I agree with Dave that property rights are important because they serve the end of being the best means of maintaining, peace among people. And I think that's kind of the core of what Dave's argument is that he thinks that open borders is going to lead to less social cooperation and less peace, because it's not, even though it's not maybe a strict private property violation when someone comes here, it is not a free market or complete voluntary transaction the way it would be in a true libertarian legal order.
Well, did he make that argument in the debate, or is that just something from outside? Because I don't think he made that argument in the debate.
I don't think he articulated it the way I'm saying it. So I'm saying the way I would understand. And okay. I know Dave, so maybe I'm giving him I have insider knowledge, I guess. But I think it's what he means by, well, and this will come out I think in more of the clips. So I have more than just those two, but I think those were two opening statements. I thought both of the opening statements were good. Because I do agree with. Actually, I think I have some more things from their opening statements. So let me just go ahead and present those.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea, because that way people can get a summary of the debate based on the opening statements instead of hearing just us rambling. Although I'm here to hear myself ramble.
We do not want this immigration policy. We want less people coming into the country, not
Oh,
more.
you can also see my wife texting me when I
Now, I
was
will
recording
point
these
this out
clips.
before I get
so-
into a little bit more of this argument. I will point out that, and I don't think I'm making a pedantic point here. I think this is actually very crucial to the debate. It is impossible to oppose this resolution unless you support unrestricted open borders, period. Like zero restrictions. Because even if you're going to argue, as Alex has in the past, and many other of his Cato colleagues, for an Ellis Island style system, you're still supporting an enormous restriction on peaceful and healthy people, because it's a prior restraint on their freedom of movement. So in other words, if the government were to say outside this venue, they were going to set up an Ellis Island style checkpoint, okay, and you had to go through this checkpoint in order to continue traveling down the road. And this meant, let's make it real Ellis Island standards. You were going to get a health and psychological evaluation, including being forced to disrobe, having your eyelids checked. If you were older, you were going to be passed on for additional screening. You would be held for at least hours, in many cases days, in extreme cases months and even years, before you were granted the right to continue traveling. Me, Gene, Alex, and every single person in this room would consider this to be an egregious violation of our liberty. We would all say, you're Joseph Stalin if you support that policy. And yet Alex and many of his colleagues will support that policy when it comes to immigration. It's almost like they're kind of admitting immigration is different. It's a different situation. And, you know, once you support something.
So there was part of that, and I have a other clip that will be kind of related from, I think, I remember this was from Alex's opening statement or one of his first rebuttal, but I have these labeled like in pairs. So here we go.
Dave is defending the resolution, quote, government restrictions on the immigration of peaceful and healthy people make sense from a libertarian standpoint, especially in present-day America, unquote. That resolution is nonsensical from a libertarian position. Dave would see it clearly if you were asked to support resolutions with a one-word difference, like, quote...
Wait, I already did
You
this
just
one.
played that one.
Yeah, sorry. I hit
That's
the wrong
okay. The truth needs to be heard, man.
clip.
I should be
Here
kind.
we go. 2B. There we go.
principles. But we also care about the consequences. We begin with a presumption of liberty, which can be overcome if immigration causes serious harm. Now, that's not the case here. Immigration consequences are overwhelmingly positive. Empirical economic research shows that immigrants pay more in taxes than they consume in benefits, or, at worst, break even. That includes costs like government schools, welfare, and criminal justice, which they all use less than native-born Americans. They are less likely to be arrested, convicted of crimes, and incarcerated. Historically, more open immigration is associated with slower growth in the size of the federal government. At the state level, more immigration is either not related to changes in economic freedom or positively correlated. Benjamin Powell and I...
All right. So what do you think of that? The reason I paired those together is I feel like, I wonder if, even if you agree with Alex in the overall side of this debate, do you think that there's at least, like, would you agree with his argument, the way he phrased it there? I think it's at least a bit of a weakness that lends to Dave's case, because he's kind of admitting, well, if there were negative consequences to immigration that outweighed the benefits, then I would be on Dave's side. So he's almost like agreeing with Dave's framework that immigration could be different, that we don't just go by what private property rights are and voluntarism, but that if the net effect of open borders and immigration was negative at any given time, then you'd have to reconsider. But he's like, but that doesn't matter because the benefits are positive.
Well, that's kind of strange to me, because I don't hear him citing the benefits as like, well, here's why it's okay to believe this. Is that,
Well,
I mean, is that what you're saying? Like he's saying, well, okay, maybe, but they're actually positive, so I don't have to answer you. Is that kind of the
I think that's
gist?
what he says in the first 15 seconds. Let's play it again quick.
Play it again.
Principles.
I'm dull.
But we also care about the consequences. We begin with a presumption of liberty, which can be overcome if
Okay.
immigration causes serious harm. Now, that's not the
Okay.
case here.
I hear you.
Immigration consequences are overwhelming.
Right. So he said it's not the case here that immigration causes harm. So it does seem to be at least agreeing with Dave in the premise of, well, if we can show that this causes
Yeah.
harm, that like the net effect
Yeah.
is, which is kind of like dubious and ill-defined. Like, what does it mean? What do you mean?
Yeah, okay. No,
How would
I
you measure
can
it?
answer
But-
that. I can answer that. I think Brian Kaplan talks, and he uses this phrase, and I think Alex also uses this phrase, keyhole solutions, right? And so if there were an invasion of the southern border, and if there were, let's just say there's a George Soros funded invasion of the southern border, and you have to specifically stop something that's more dangerous and egregious, I would say that that's an overwhelming reason why you shouldn't have immigration of those people. I don't think Alex is saying that the broad libertarian principle is, well, it's a libertarian principle, but we also care about the consequences, which can sometimes maybe theoretically override the principles, which is what he said, so that's fine. But I don't think he's saying that the whole policy all in and of itself. I think he's more saying, like, if somebody is a clear and present danger to America, we're not going to let that person in or that group in potentially. That's probably the keyhole solution that they would talk about.
But so what do you think about that? Because I kind of agree, but I think what do you make of Dave's point that, like, the way that people will commonly argue to do that is that, well, you know, we have an Ellis Island system, immigration system, and Dave says, okay, well, this is still in the abstract theory a violation of property rights and whatnot, like you're infringing upon people, and in any other context, like what Alex said, he's like, well, Dave in any other context would not support these kind of restrictions. You know, if we changed out the word gun control or vaccine mandates or whatever. But when it comes to immigration, he would. And Dave seems to be basically making the argument like, well, you are too, because Ellis Island is still not, which is, by the way, Norm made a comment, which I think this is a good time to respond to. He said, Jacob, you haven't really responded to why Alex is wrong in his key statement in the opening you clipped. Alex isn't wrong, except that he's not an ANCAP. And that is where I find Alex's position inconsistent, because I agree with him on the principle, but I think the only way you actually truly have a system where everything is truly voluntary, even along the lines of the movement of people, is without state borders in a true ANCAP society. So I'm sympathetic to Dave's position that any immigration policy is an immigration policy, even open borders.
Jacob, let me ask you a question. If you didn't know who these people were and you just happened to walk in on that room on the debate, which person on the stage would you say is in favor of government use of force against immigrants, and which would you say is 100% against it? You would not get that Alex Nowrasteh is not an ANCAP and Dave is. You would get the opposite impression based on that particular debate.
I don't know, because Alex seemed to, this is one of the things I think Alex dropped. Alex, I don't think meaningfully, other than saying like, well, Ellis Island would be a vast improvement, but yeah, we could do better. But when asked to define what was better, I don't think he really gave a very concrete answer, other than saying like kind of vague, well, we would just find the people who were criminals. It's like, but like how, like you just wait until they do. So I don't know that it was a very clear answer. I do think some of this will actually come out in some more of the clips, so maybe we can just play some more of them.
Before you read Norman's thing, I forget what you were asking me. This is like ADHD moment for both of us here. You were asking me a question, and then you read Norman's thing, and I forgot the question because then we started talking about ANCAP stuff.
Oh, I don't. I think you were. I don't know. I don't know. I thought you asked me a question after I read Norm's comment, which was, which one would I think is...
No, but it was before that. Maybe I just had a thought I wanted to share and I forgot it, so we're good. You can keep going.
If it comes up, you can bring it up. All right, let's go to video file. So we did 2, so now we're going to do... we're going to do 3 first, or we're going to do 4? I guess we'll do 3 first.
Who said government property is illegitimate. And it's like, okay, Now, I understand that's not exactly your argument. My point is just that many of the people who argue for this lax immigration policy, they act as if that's the pure libertarian position. But ask yourself, is that really the pure libertarian position? Is it the case that if the government is currently in control of some property, that therefore there ought to be zero restrictions? If that were the case, then public schools could not tell a random 55-year-old drug addict that he can't enter the school and hang out in the girls' bathroom. Why? Would you restrict someone's freedom of movement?
That was funny.
Would you say that all government property, you should be able to scream obscenities in a public library, that you should be able to lay down and camp out in the middle of a freeway? Is it wrong? Is the libertarian position that since a government has control of a highway, therefore they cannot institute a speed limit? That the speed limit ought to be whatever you can do? I don't think that actually follows. I think that if we recognize that taxation is theft, and we recognize that governments are built off aggression, they built and maintained public property with tax dollars that they took at the threat of violence from the American people. And what the American people want them to do with those tax dollars ought to play somewhat of a role. Now, I'm not arguing, as some other libertarians have, and I think they overstate the case a little bit, that public property is owned by the taxpayers or owned by the net taxpayers. I'm simply arguing that the American people have a better claim than others do, which is really, I think, the fundamental, what property rights kind of starts as. But the idea that if the American government is doing something, it ought to be for the American people. It ought to be in their interest.
So you said you remembered. I could play the next clip from Alex, which goes with this.
Yeah.
Or you said you remembered your question.
Well, you were talking about, so, okay. A couple of things that I think are, it's kind of tough to do this in a debate. And when I was sitting there watching this, I was thinking, okay, both of them, and I don't have one in mind for Alex right now, but he kind of missed some of the points that Dave was making, and I wish he would have addressed them. But there are two things. When somebody from Cato Institute or anybody who is in the like open borders libertarian position, okay, is citing statistics, and they're saying the whole GDP comment, I get Dave's point. That's fine. He can make that. He doesn't make it here, but he makes this comment that no libertarian economist should ever cite GDP as a reason for anything because it's kind of a useless statistic. Okay, fine. I'll take that point. But the idea, I mean, I've got Brian Kaplan's book over my shoulder. I've got Jason Brennan's book on this. By and large, the economic data about the benefits globally of immigration and free movement of people is like a slam dunk in favor of human flourishing. Okay, so you can't walk away from those statistics and say, this might be really bad for us. At best, it's a neutral, and most statistics say that they're better. The reason that we do this is not, well, because of the consequentialism of, or because of the consequences, we should just, quote unquote, use Dave's words, force on the American people things that they don't want anyway. That's not the point. The point is to rhetorically tell people this is better for you. It's not to tell them they have to do it anyway. That would not be libertarian, of course. It's to say the world is better in this scenario. So there's a rhetorical reason why they do that. The data is on that side. The second thing is the Ellis Island policy is not a like, hey, this is what we want. This is like, hey, this would be better. Just in the same way that, like, I don't know, it would be better. Most libertarians who are anarchists would say, well, going back to what the Constitution actually says, like a constitutional republic would actually be better, even though we would like.
Okay, but so here's where I think.
So I'm just saying it's a rhetorical play. So I don't think the Ellis Island thing is, yes, from a strict position, no. Alex, if we didn't have that, Alex wouldn't vote for it. But since we're well past Ellis Island, it'd be nice if we had more immigration, and that's what he's advocating for. So good, better, best sort of scenario here.
But I think it's the same thing Dave's doing, because Dave's best is we don't have a state, we have an ANCAP society, the market, because like Alex kept on later in the debate going, let the market decide. And Dave's like, yeah, I want to let the market decide. But when governments and NGOs and intelligence agencies, and then you have also the blowback of our foreign policy, create massive influxes of people, that's not the free market deciding. That is governments artificially creating movements of people.
You sure maybe it's not the free market solving the problems of the government? The government creates mass immigration. People are coming here, and these people who are now destitute because of our stupid government are now finding use this word just because it's the only word that comes to mind, finding refuge in companies that are willing to hire them.
Right, but I think even Dave would say he's fine with, because that's the other thing. They kept on saying, Alex kept on saying, like, well, they have a right to be hired. And Dave, like, what Dave proposes is essentially close to an Ellis Island with also like if people are coming here to work, they should be allowed to come to work. The system should be streamlined. Like he's not defending, that piece of paper that Alex gave all of us.
Yeah.
Dave's not
we're
like
all
saying,
familiar with it. Yeah.
Dave's not like, yes, that's what I want. Let's keep defending that. I just think, Dave's not, I think, and that I didn't clip this, but that whole metaphor about like, which is very vulgar. The asking a woman, like, would you sleep with me for like $1 million? And she goes like, yes. And he's like, okay, would you sleep with me for $1?
Yeah.
And she's like, no.
What do
kind
you
of
take
woman
me
do you
for?
think I am? And he's like, we already established what kind of woman you are. Now we're just negotiating. So I think Dave's point is that, listen, we all agree on the abstract theory that governments shouldn't exist, shouldn't do anything, but we live in a government, and they've established this sort of pseudo public property in the establishment of the nation state. So if you're okay with the state having some semblance of control and governance when it enforces murder laws, when it, keeps, homeless people out of schools, right, and drug addicts off the streets and whatnot, then and you're also okay with an Ellis Island system, then it's like, okay, we're already agreeing that in the triage of what we're dealing with right now, we're accepting that it's going to be an imperfect solution in terms of what immigration policy we pursue.
Yeah, but I understand that, and there is a sense in which I will argue with, say, a friend who doesn't agree with me, and argue sort of the hardline position, the ANCAP position, or the like hardline libertarian position, and then you sort of say, okay, once we agree on these principles, okay, yeah, things should be voluntary. Well, which is more voluntary? The thing that you're advocating for, like universal health care or universal basic income or something like that, or this other thing? And if you're, especially for Christians, you can even say, well, you can bring in the whole nonviolence thing. You could bring in the whole like early church was all voluntary, so that's why it worked kind of stuff. I mean, you got a lot of room to play there. So I'm perfectly fine with, well, hey, we're negotiating what is a good, better, best policy given the circumstances that we have. And I know that I understand why people like Alex will have the sort of the moniker like utopian or pie in the sky or beltway libertarian kind of as a reputation. But at the same time, the argument is over whether or not it's the debate specifically was over libertarian principles, not what is realistic. And the other thing, it's kind of, Alex brought this up after the debate at the after party, which we got to hang out at. Why is the solution to, well, I guess if we have a state, we might as well use it? Why is that more libertarian? It may be more practical. It might be the right thing to do from time to time. It might be all you can do. It is not the libertarian position.
Well, let's play some more clips, because some of that will come out in in more of them. But those are fair
yes,
questions.
Okay. Yeah.
And some of this is stuff that they already engaged on. So all right, we did. Let me do Alex's rebuttal, or the thing I had for like I was trying to be fair, and like every clip of one, I have a clip of another, kind of like presenting their counter view. So let me play that first.
The point to understand about immigration law is it is the exact opposite of every other portion of American law and our Anglo-Saxon system of jurisprudence. Every other portion of law, it says specifically what is not allowed, but everything else is fine. There's no law that says Dave and I can shake hands, right? But there's a law that says he can't punch me in the face. Okay, that makes sense. Immigration law is the opposite. It says all immigration is illegal except what the government specifically allows. If you fit into a narrow Soviet-style category, then maybe if you apply and wait 20, 30, 50 years, yeah, you can get in. Otherwise, there is no way for you to come in. It is the opposite of our legal traditions. To support government immigration restrictions and mass deportations means that you must also support the methods of actually enforcing those laws. These enforcement methods are some of the most anti-libertarian laws in existence. Examples: Trump designated drug cartels as terrorists and is considering designating some gang members arrested inside of the U.S. as enemy combatants to stop immigration. Trump wanted to send U.S. troops to Mexico to fight a war against terrorist cartels. He deployed the military to the border. He used the Alien Enemies Act to deport migrants to prison camps in El Salvador without due process. The Alien Enemies Act allows federal officers, ICE agents, to enter houses without a warrant to arrest migrants the president designates as terrorists or invaders. Most federal law enforcement officers actually work to enforce immigration laws. Every time you travel, you must show your papers. Every time you get a job, you must fill out the I-9 form to prove to the government that you are complying with immigration laws. Many states and the federal government require employers to check your papers against federal databases through the E-Verify system when you apply for a job. And, mark my words, E-Verify will be used for gun checks. It's just a matter of time. Every significant proposal for a national biometric identity card is designed to enforce immigration laws. There are vaccine mandates for immigrants. The government is
Right. So I thought this was a fair rebuttal because, like, this. So I'm remembering my thought process. The clip I played today first, I thought he made a good argument. This was one of Alex's better repeated arguments throughout the debate. One I'm sympathetic to that I've even presented to Dave when I had him on the show last year to talk about immigration. Because I'm like, Dave, I get where you're coming from here, and I do think there's a middle ground about like what do we do in the interim. But I'm going to be a lot closer to Alex's point of view where like we got to be really careful here because like I agree with like what I think his he had like 3 points in his opening statement. His third one was immigration control is how totalitarianism will come to the US. And like if we had like one of the lessons we should have learned from the COVID lockdowns was that like any ounce of power we give to the government to control the movement of people inside the country or coming in or in some cases being able to leave, that is power we must like fight tooth and nail to not give them more than we can, absolutely afford to get away with giving them. So
what's Dave's, I mean, based on your conversation, I know it was about a year ago, but like what's his argument about the whole you're basically endorsing the capacity for ICE, right? Like, does that make sense? Like the police state argument.
He would want to so I actually thought Dave should have answered the question that I know the guy who asked it. I'm forgetting his name. But he asked about the Constitution, and Dave kind of like deflected it, which I thought was disappointing because I thought Dave should have used that to talk about. I know his positions are that like it would be better to abolish ICE, abolish the Department of Homeland Security, and to actually I agree with Alex that the Constitution really doesn't have doesn't give the federal government the power to do much about immigration other than like in war, I guess, right? If there's like a little bit of, I guess, implied power, like if you're in war and you've raised an army to fight a war, then like you can enforce the border against like invading armies or something. But in terms of immigration proper, that should fall more to the states, and that's what Dave kind of alludes to, is that like it would be better to have the states set more policies that would then be based on pseudo like Ellis Island systems and like work visas and things like that. So that was,
I mean, I guess I would be like sympathetic if the debate was, you're not allowed to come here. We're going to do everything we're going to do everything we can to prevent you from being here, literally closing the border, whatever that means. If you get lucky, we're not going to harm you because we're not about that. I guess maybe that, but like the deportations and the whole like there's people
I
that
agree.
we don't want.
Yeah, I'm not down with the deportations.
I said in theory, by the way, just for the record.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask Dave about the deportations, and I didn't get a chance to ask him, but I asked him at the after party, and I was like, listen, like even if we just grant everything you said about the problems of open borders, I still think deportations are like a line too far in the kind of realm of what Alex is talking about with like, how government policies get turned against us. Like, like talk about like you think it was bad when the Patriot Act got turned against us, like mass deportations. I mean, that's an instance where you'd have to say, even if open borders was like a, disease, deportations would be a case where the cure is worse than the disease. And he was sympathetic to that, I think. Anyway, do you have anything you want to say on?
No, not at that point. No, we can keep moving
right,
on your stuff.
Also, everyone, if you are enjoying this back and forth banter, first of all, I hope you like this video, subscribe wherever you're watching if you haven't already. Helps us out. Or if you're listening on the audio afterwards, 5-star reviews, sharing it on your social media. We greatly appreciate that. I hope, this is not just for the subject of immigration. I hope this is just a showcase of what we have to offer here at LCI, which is diverse points of view, being able to have civil discourse on these subjects, which I hope is educational and edifying for everyone. As I said in the opening clip, I said I kind of fought for us to go watch this because I find the immigration debate to be very fascinating, and I kind of I think throughout that debate, Doug can probably confirm this. Every time they were talking, I was nodding my head yeah. Like Dave would go up, I'd be like, yeah. And Alex would get up, I'd be like, yeah, you're right.
So you're the reason why the 10 libertarians in a room have 11 opinions.
Exactly. Yeah, actually, I have all 10 of those opinions just by myself. All right. We're gonna do.
Hey, we should. Hey, I want to bring this one up here. I know he didn't pay for it, but he
paid for it with so Cody has
with the punishment of coming on your show.
Well, he has a work visa with LCI, so he's allowed to have his comments put up here in our private property. Anyway, I agree with Alex. He brings up some tantalizing, potentially good points, but he doesn't really bring it home with a little more clarity. He could have gut punched Dave's arguments. He rarely does. I probably wouldn't quite phrase it that way, but I feel like it would have if he would have engaged with a counter argument on a couple of Dave's points, it would have been harder for me to vote. But because he left a couple of them on the table, I was like, I evaluate debates because I have a background in speech and debate just on who presented their arguments better, defended them better, had points that went unchallenged. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah. No, in fact, the reason I wanted to bring that up is that it was essentially sort of the missing ingredient that I saw in Alex's arguments. And, this is kind of, you would probably be able to say this if Dave were on the other side. Well, you have sort of said this. It's well, I wish Dave would have done this. It's if you know the person's argument really well. Now they're in the spotlight, right? They're in the hot seat. And so they're not going to think of everything that the crowd is going to think, oh, wow, Alex, if you just go this one little direction, this will really nail it, And so I had a few of those because I know the arguments pretty well, and I know his side of things. Of course, he's been on my show, and we've talked about this. And so it sort of reflected the way that I thought about it, especially more specifically. And I don't know if you're going to get into this more. We can talk about it with the clip, but the whole will of the people stuff, how people actually, Dave went really hard on the whole the American people are overwhelmingly saying we don't want immigrants, and Alex could have gone with a handful of arguments against that.
Yeah. All right. Let me play the next one. I don't remember what this one is, so I'll remember though once we play it.
In this criminal organization that robs me and you more money. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality of the state.
One of the best.
By the way, that was
the Q&A.
Yeah, this was in the Q&A. That little thing he ended on, because I know you brought up the whole GDP thing. I thought that I am curious what your thoughts are there, because I get the whole free movement of people, importance to free markets and human flourishing, Austrian economics and all that. But I thought Dave's point was at least somewhat something to consider, that not everything that increases GDP is just necessarily a net good, right?
Sure.
Especially if it's half of our GDP is government spending, right? More than half of it actually. It's just the government prints money and then, uses that money in the economy in ways that are not things we generally support. So it can look good.
Yeah, no, I understand your point. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, let's keep playing.
Best observations by Ludwig von Mises in his theory of interventionism was that one government regulation or law causes other problems that then require other regulations to fix, in this sort of never-ending cycle till where you get total government control over society. So what we have here is Dave saying there are some problems caused by public schools, by welfare, and these other things, and the solution is even more government control over the movement of people across borders. I think he's falling into this trap that Ludwig von Mises identified as being one that leads increasingly toward more state and government control over the economy. And I think the duty, the goal, the point of libertarians is to push back against the state control, not to try to make little compromises here and there and try to play the political economy game as if there's more than like 50 of us in the entire world and we can control political outcomes. Is to try to think through what kind of system, what kind of rules maximize individual liberty, maximize our freedom, maximize our prosperity.
Can I ask Alex a question?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay,
Yes.
like a hypothetical question. Let's say there's a government, could be a foreign country. Let's say it's in Sweden. Yeah. The government is doing something me and you would both agree it shouldn't be doing. Yeah. And let's say you're there and you convince them all with your superior arguments. You know, the government has a factory and it's producing shoes. And Alex, you convince them that this should be privatized. Like, the government doesn't need to be in the business of making shoes. The market will do it much better. This factory should be privatized. And there were two proposals for privatization that were on the table. And so proposal A was, I don't know, something like, we're going to privatize this company and all of the taxpayers will get like a share in it, or the people who homesteaded it will get a share in it or something like that. And then proposal B was, we're going to privatize this company and it will 100% be owned by a Chinese firm. That had nothing to do with paying the taxes, nothing to do with building it, none of that. Is one of those proposals preferable to the other?
Depends whatever gets the maximum price. Whatever you sell the asset for at the highest price, which will partly, hopefully, compensate the poor Swedish taxpayer who's had to suffer, at least for a tax rebate for the crappy government shoes they've had to wear for so long.
Wait, but hold on, Alex. I just want to be clear on this.
So whatever maximizes the price.
Hold on. So I want to be clear on this, okay? So if the taxpayers are forced to build something, you do not think that they have any better claim on that? Like, in those two scenarios, everyone in this room cannot say that there isn't one that's clearly preferable, which is that the taxpayers who have been forced to build and fund the maintenance of this thing get it, rather than some Chinese company who had absolutely nothing to do with it. They just get it. It just seems to me, Alex, like the answer is so obvious, but you just don't like the implication of what that answer would be.
I'm thinking like an economist who believes in getting maximum price for the assets that you sell. Obviously, I think the Swedish government should get the maximum price it can for the assets it sells and use that to do a rebate on the taxpayers of Sweden, rather than trying to give it up.
Okay, but that second part, kind of sneaks
some kind
out.
of like centrally planned scheme.
Okay.
We see countries around the world try to privatize state-owned assets for the schemes that you justify, and it doesn't work. It didn't work.
Hold on. But it would
There's
go
a lot
as
of other things going on here.
Alex, but it would go as a rebate back to the taxpayer. So, like, if I were to steal money from you and buy a house, and then I'm out of money, it's rightful that it should go to you. It should just go to whoever I can get the most money for. But you see, he snuck in there on the condition that I'm giving the money back to you afterward. So that's kind of okay, why? Why should the money go back to the taxpayers?
Because they own it. Because they got
fleeced. Do they?
Because they got fleeced.
Oh, that's interesting that you said that, Alex. You heard it here. That's all I needed. Because they own it. That's right, Alex. They sure do.
All right. So what did you make about that moment? Everyone in the crowd, not everyone, a lot of people in the crowd thought that was a gotcha moment.
What's interesting is
an interesting point that go ahead.
No, go ahead. You brought up an interesting point.
Well, I just thought I've heard Dave pose this question before, so I was ready for it. But I've never heard someone come up with Alex's idea, which is just because he's an economist, and that's actually even Dave.
What do other people answer?
Yeah, that's a fair point. People usually don't want to answer, and they'll just be like, it doesn't matter, or or just give it back to the taxpayers. But
just sort of Alex's answer.
Well, do it whatever has the most profit. But it should then that should be used to recompensate the taxpayers.
Yeah. So no, let me give you in the moment that felt like a really big gotcha. But what was missing though is that Dave thought Alex was saying that the thing being sold was the property of the people, and what Alex was answering was their money was what the property that had been stolen and should be returned back to them. The people didn't own the factory.
I think Dave's point.
Right, but Dave thought he was admitting that they owned the factory.
Well, I think Dave's saying they have a better claim to the factory because their assets were stolen to create that factory.
What do they have a claim?
Right,
well, hold on though.
Think,
what do they have a claim to? They have a claim to the factory, or they have a claim to the money that was stolen that the central planners decided to make a factory.
Well, so if the factory was sold to the Chinese firm, like in Dave's example here, is that better than if it went? So, like, pretend Alex didn't have his answer of we'll sell to the Chinese firm and recompensate the taxpayers.
Okay.
Is it better for it to go to the Chinese firm or to go back to the taxpayers? Like they own it, and you figure out.
So
how
the missing
they incorporate it or sell it.
Yeah, sure. The missing point is, how do we determine what the will of the Swedish taxpayers in this situation is? What if the Swedes want the Chinese to buy it because that's the highest dollar value? Or what if they want the Chinese to buy it for some other reason? Or what if they want to, do an employee-owned company and they all have a share in it? Like, the operative question, if you're trying to take Dave's will of the people situation, is not the Swedish government gets to decide who it goes to. The question is, how do we decide if the people want it to go one way or another, or third way or fourth way, right? And that's not answered in this little hypothetical, right? And so I didn't care much for Alex's answer. I mean, it was fine. It was a good answer as stated. But the question, if Dave wants to get across the point that the people ought to have that the people have a will that is in some way mediated by the state as the central planner is not the only, like, just whatever they do isn't the will of the people. We know that, right? And I think Dave would even agree with that. But it's a matter of how do you know that the will of the people is that it goes to a Swedish owner or multiple owners or whatever, or to a Chinese whatever? I mean, do we have a referendum? Like, that's really the operative question if Dave really wants to go deep on what is the will of the people.
I don't even know if he's saying it's the will of the people, just like who has the best claim. Now, if they had, and if you say I think even in your answer there, you're saying, well, they have the best claim, but what do they want done with it? Sure, maybe they want to sell it to the Chinese firm, but that would only make sense in the context of, like, you're saying it's fine if they want to sell it to the Chinese firm, but that kind of, like, doesn't that admit Dave's point that, like, well, we're saying it is better if that asset is handled in a way that is congruent with the interests.
Dave doesn't know the answer.
Base was robbed from to build that factory in the first place.
So the goal
Alex
is
said,
who has
like,
a right claim, right?
Or the best claim. Because I think the problem with public property is, like, because it's created with theft, it's not, like, perfect. It's not going to adhere to perfect, like, Rothbardian, anarcho-capitalist, libertarian title transfer, like, property rights theory, right? Like, so, which is why the libertarian answer is to privatize things, or at least not if you're going to have publicly owned. I know Cody, if he's listening still, will say we don't have to privatize anything. We can still have publicly owned things without coercion. Fine, but, like, so we need to either privatize everything or make it voluntarily public. But either way, like, if we don't have that, or if we're trying to move towards that, what do you do with the assets that were built with theft? And there are some ANCAPs who basically say, well, it actually defaults to unowned and everyone has an equal claim to it. And I think Dave's saying that doesn't follow.
I'm not sure I would. Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far per se. I mean, I haven't thought through it that much, but I mean, the idea of a right to a claim over the shoe factory is kind of Dave's larger point is will of the people stuff, right? That's his big thing. Like, the American people have a claim over what happened, what the country does, whatever that's supposed to mean. I mean, again, it's collectivist language. As a libertarian, I kind of have to wrap my head around that, right? And so, I mean, this example is, I mean, it's a little faulty, and I don't want to fault the example, but I mean, I kind of get at what he's saying, but it's like, if he's right, then the will of the people needs to be determined, whatever that is. So, I guess in a sense, there is a way in which you can say, well, the Swedish people get to decide what happens to the shoe factory, But that doesn't mean that Dave's thought experiment here means that the Swedes, need to own the shoe factory in some privatized way. It just means that they get to decide, which leads to the other questions, the other thoughts about, like, well, what does it mean that the people decide what happens with immigration in America? Like voting? Like, we're going to go with, well, Donald Trump got elected, and therefore the will of the people is that we want deportations or we want no immigration?
That is a perfect segue to the last clip I
There we
have.
go. Good.
So we have spontaneous...
Well, it's good to talk about because I think that's an important
Yeah.
distinction, this whole will of the people stuff.
Yeah, so I think this will kind of cut to the answer of that.
You would have large areas of agreement about how much government interventions create other problems that then beget other government interventions. That's true. If you think the only reason why people were like upset at the Biden immigration was the chaos at the border, as your guy,
Yeah, and the knock-on
hold on, but let me
effects
just
of those.
say this.
Yeah.
As your guy said, since 1965, for most of the years, it's been single digits of Americans who supported high levels of immigration. The truth is that the American people don't want these people here. And the problem is that if you're not willing to grapple with that kind of uncomfortable reality, you're going to get it all. You could run me all the regressions you want to about how immigrants expand the economy, they contribute more to the economy. Therefore, if we have Alex's immigration policy, which will probably lead to 5, 10, 20 million immigrants coming here next year, we're going to get this big explosion in GDP. Let me tell you what we're going to get. We're going to get Pinochet elected president. That's what you're going to get if you have immigration.
I sure wish you appealed to libertarian principles as much as you appeal to public opinion.
I actually am.
Okay.
No, you're actually
I'm
not.
appealing
All
to
you're
both.
doing is democratic fundamentalism. What does the median voter want? What does this poll say? What does this survey say?
Well, Alex,
this debate is about libertarianism
Yes.
and libertarian principles. I wish you would stick to that rather than
listen-
making these arguments about, oh, gee, I wonder what the moderate Republican wants. We
Hold
got to
on,
do what
Alex.
that guy wants.
Alex, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Who cares?
Okay, fine. You can say that. You can say, who cares? Listen, I do think in my opening, I was making an appeal to libertarian principles. If you don't agree with them, that's fine. Let me tell you this. When you say, who cares, you're making empirical claims about what's going to happen if we have higher levels of immigration. When you say this appeal to democracy, it's called, something libertarians don't like that much, living in reality. That's what we live in. We live in a country that has votes. We have a presidential election every 4 years. What was the result of record high numbers of people coming into this country illegally? The result was Donald Trump winning every swing state and the popular vote. You guys want to deal with reality a little bit? What do you think it would be if we took the numbers that came in under Joe Biden and multiplied them by 5 or 10? What do you think this country is going to look like? And is that just me making an appeal to what the average voter thinks? I'm making an appeal to what type of country our children are going to grow up
And
in.
Dave has the gall to call me a Beltway libertarian? He
That
calls
was
me
his
a
gotcha
Beltway
line,
libertarian
honestly.
and Cato? That is the most in the swamp
Okay,
argument
now,
that I've
imagine-
Whew, that was probably probably the most heated moment of the debate because
the last two clips I just shared were the really big ones.
Yeah.
Were in the not even, it was just the moderator Q&A portion, not even the audience Q&A portion, I think. But
we didn't have a lot of that because they had a lot more of their back and forth, and Gene was doing his moderator questioning.
yeah. So we're going to wrap up here soon in a little bit. I said in the comments that we'll take a little bit of audience Q&A before we go.
Yeah.
So you guys can post a few questions here. Then we'll also post some LCI updates before we hop off. But we'll you guys do that while Doug and I, do our last little responses to that last clip and just the debate entirely. I think Dave's point, and then I'll give you the last word on everything, which I'm sympathetic to, not because, here's the thing, because the resolution said libertarian principles, it gets a little bit murky because then you have to decide, well, like what all fits in the umbrella of libertarian, principles, I guess, right? But in just terms of the actual issue, I think Dave is right to point out that, like, hey, like, I don't know that you can dispute his argumentation there that the causality of record high immigration being at least heavily correlated with why Trump did so well when he lost in 2020 and then won. He won with a wider margin and the popular vote, unlike in 2016. And that did seem to be, again, like we talked about our opening thing, like immigration was the at least one of the decisive issues of this election, because for the first time ever, you had two candidates going like, I'm tougher on immigration. No, I'm tougher on immigration. So it did seem, and so he's like, all right, if we go with open borders and we see an increase in immigration, aren't we going to get even worse than Trump? Aren't we going to get just another? And so I think what Dave's saying is that, like, whether or not, like, we have to deal with the reality of what we have now, which is the democratic system that we find ourselves in. And there is an overwhelming majority within that democratic system who are saying, we don't want this massive immigration, and we're willing to vote for any authoritarian who gets up there and tells us he's going to do something about it. And do we want to stoke that reactionary fire? Now, is that an argument based on strategy, maybe more than libertarian principles? I think Dave's trying to make the statement that it's both, because part of libertarian principles is voluntary association. And if a overwhelming majority can be demonstrated, which he thinks you can make that case, that an overwhelming majority have said they don't want these current numbers of immigration. Dave's not arguing for zero immigration, but he's just saying the current trajectory and the proposed, like, if we had open borders, the higher numbers that would presumably come from that's we know that's not voluntary, because despite the economic, I think Alex is trying to say it's voluntary because of, like, the trade aspect. But Dave's saying it's not voluntary because look at the reactionary aspect. And I kind of feel like this is one of the things where I'm kind of split the baby, and I'm like, you kind of both have a point there, and that's why I think this is hard. Because on the economic side, kind of agree with Alex, but on the on the sort of like societal, sort of like trends and blowbacks, how that plays out in politics, I think Dave has a point.
Wow, there's a lot. Okay, there's some roads to go down here. The whole idea of preferences that voters have, it doesn't. Yes, I know that the number two issue for Trump voters was immigration. Number one was the economy. Number two is immigration. Okay, great. So there were a lot of Trump voters who were concerned about immigration. Why were they concerned about immigration? Are they economists who have looked into whether or not immigrants are threatening their jobs? Are they people in the South who might rightly have some fear because they're look, I don't disparage anybody who has some sort of fear of their way of life being either threatened or being uncomfortable. I would want to, if I were friends with these people, I would want to encourage them to take a deep breath, think about it. I would try to encourage them to think differently about the issue. But what are the reasons why people said and believed that immigration was the problem? Was it because they were well-read and studied and understood the ramifications to the economy and to their way of life? Or was it because Trump was stoking fear? And it was because two people were trying to get elected over top of one another? Like, I don't feel like the populist movement to say, rah, rah, we need to keep the immigrants out was a rational, fully rational reaction. So I think there's a lot of assumptions made about the average voter and why they voted for Trump, and why, two, they even thought that immigrants were actually the problem.
Would you agree that there's at least maybe you don't think it's like wide scale enough to propose or to pose a significant threat, but it does seem like empirically there are cases of, at least in certain cities and states, where massive influx of immigration did cause slight spikes in crime, a lot of instability. You had like mayors and, governors saying like, we can't handle this. We have nowhere to put them. They're taking over hotels and things like that. And that's with, the numbers we have currently, which have even dropped under Trump already. And so like, I think Dave's saying like, and that's what, and we got this, you know what, like, we don't want to have democracy because what you get is people like Trump. So like, all right, so like, yeah, everything you said has some merit, but are we going to convince enough people to think rationally on the subject to then prevent the sort of like, you could say it's almost like a type of blowback in a sense that people are going to see the problems caused by massive influxes of immigration and not have the time preference to be like, yeah, but if we like wait this out and start repealing welfare and start like, heck, we had Elon and all this, movement behind Doge to do cuts to government spending, and it went so well that everyone is turning on Thomas. Actually, surprisingly, not everyone's turning on Thomas Massey, but Trump wants everyone to turn on Thomas Massey. That's how well cutting government spending went, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I think even Dave would agree with Alex. Like, yeah, of course, like cut back welfare, cut back the over-regulation, and like those are great solutions. But like, man, like what, like we can play like game theory with like how we would roll back the state all we want, but like we're not doing it. So is there some triage that has to come into play here?
Okay, so people vote one way. They say they don't want immigrants. They say, what was this, the Cato Institute thing that Dave made fun of? I think he quoted, if people watch the whole debate, it's like 91% of people want lower immigration, or something like that. So the voting part is one, but how are people actually acting? They probably don't even realize that they're actually supporting immigrants through how they behave in the market, through the businesses that they support, through the who they hire to do their lawn care and their hardscaping and their roofing, and who they are relying on to do all kinds of things that is communicating to the market that how they voted was just their emotional reaction to what they thought Trump could get done for them. But their real actions were supportive of immigration, because otherwise they'd be an outrage just the way people became outraged about tariffs. It's like, wait, what? No cheap goods from China? Well, actually, I do want Chinese teenagers and young adults making my iPhones. Like that's been the reaction. So when we talk about, well, what do the people want? Okay, fine. Let's say that we can't rationally talk them down from the tree, so to speak, or off the cliff, or whatever the metaphor is. We can't do that, but we can actually just point out that you're actually not living and acting in accordance to the behavior that you want, that you're acting. And again, I'm communicating that just as a general market rule. The U.S. is not doing that. The U.S. is very dependent upon immigrant labor, immigrant skills, immigrant intelligence, all kinds of things. And so I don't believe people when they say they want less immigration. I believe they want less immigration, but I don't think they actually want to live in that world, because they don't choose to live in that world. And that's what I think. That's where Alex, he tried to make that point in certain ways, but that's okay. Bring up Cody's comment earlier about like, he didn't quite punch it home, and it didn't really sink in. There was no like ha moment. To quote Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, but I don't know that like, I don't think people are necessarily going around like screening like, are you an immigrant, when they do transact. And like, how many of our transactions now don't even happen like face to face, right? Like when I order DoorDash or Uber, it's like I'm not screening to be like, like if I was like a real hardcore right reactionary, and like, which I'm not, but like just for sake of example, like I'm not sitting there going like, I need to make sure my Uber driver's white before he gets here, right?
Okay, that's my point. That's my point. They're not doing that. But when they're voting, they get in the voting booth and they're saying, I actually don't want my Uber driver to be like that.
Right, but I think that's just a difference of like you're voting your preferences in terms of like the policy, but like there's not actually a mechanism there's not a reasonable mechanism for screening if who you're transacting with is an immigrant. And so people aren't going to shoot themselves in the foot just because they don't want, like if their car's broken down and they voted against immigration, but the only tow truck driver within miles is one that's run by an immigrant, like they'd have to be like super duper duper emotional to be like, I'm not going to accept them. But like they could say, I'm going to use this because it's all I got right now, but doesn't mean I'm going to change my opinions that we need less. And even then, it's like, unless you're
telling me that they're going to vote for less of the good benefits they get out of the market if they actually paid attention and knew it.
If everyone acted the way you were acting, we wouldn't have to even do what we do, because people would just all be libertarian.
Well, fair point, I guess.
So
but
I think that's part of the problem.
No, I guess to bring this to, like, I told Alex after the debate, I was like, you should have gone Brian Kaplan, Myth of the Rational Voter, on people. It's like most people think that oil companies make 40% profit. Most people think that Walmart makes 30% profit when they don't. Like they are wild. People think that gas taxes is like 2-3 cents or whatever it was. Anyway, people are really wrong about how actual things are done. And if people were to be asked, like you ask people, what is the share of the money that goes to like foreign aid and stuff? People think it's like 30%. Conservatives, because they don't like that. They think it's like 30%. And it's like 2 or some crazy low number. So people are really, really off. And what they don't know is that immigration, they do know this, but they don't believe this in their head, that immigrants actually make their lives better. And if they actually knew all that, and we rip the carpet out from underneath of them, so to speak, they wouldn't like that world, because they're choosing to live in it and they're choosing to operate in it.
Fair enough. We could keep going, but
yeah, we could. Well, we will keep going. This is the is not the I'm neither Brian Kaplan nor Alex Nowrasteh, so I'm not going to convince everybody on this live stream.
My final thing will be that I do think that Alex should have. I think he tried to bite this bullet, but didn't quite bite it, because I think Dave's point was like, so what do we have now? Do we advocate? Is there a number where we say this is too much, or is it just unlimited? And I think Alex was like, not quite coming out and just saying we don't put a cap or a number on it. He was kind of like dancing around that. So,
well, what's the proper number of shoes to be made in the economy?
We don't know.
No, let the market decide.
But I don't think the market's deciding right now. That's kind of the issue. Like when you have massive immigration that's kind of being, again, sort of not, it's being artificially stimulated by all the factors, by welfare, by the war on drugs, by our foreign policy, by NGOs and UN, people and groups who are like, explicitly like, yeah, we want to do like demographic change. And we're like, this is something Rothbard wrote in like Nations by Consent. And I got a little bug here that's distracting me. All
right, Uncle Joe.
Gosh. No, like we see this even like with current conflicts in Eastern Europe, right? Where like there's a reason why there's a bunch of Russians in certain territories around Russia, because back when it was the Soviet Union, they used to like do intentional demographic change to make it easier to control the certain territories they were trying to maintain their sovereignty over. And so like this was part of why Rothbard retracted his open border stance late in his life, because he was like, you know what, like there is a sense in which open borders can be weaponized, or just borders in general can be weaponized by states to further their interests. And that the whole idea of like, which they didn't get into this enough, like if higher levels of immigration are correlated with increase in government or decrease in government, and they were talking about both increase and decrease and also the rate of growth. But I think that's anyway, that's conversations to be had in the future, I think.
All right. Audience Q&A, do we have some?
Let me scroll through here. I thought I might have saw a couple.
There's one. Why pick the size of the Department of Education? So that was a comment like sort of on what I was saying about like picking, how many immigrants.
Right. Well, I think like the answer is like abolish the Department of Education, right? But
I will say that the one thing that I was disappointed did not get said is we should abolish the drug war. Like that was a huge thing. I was just like that. I would have had that on my bingo card maybe twice if we had bingo cards.
Yeah, it didn't really come up.
Didn't come up at all.
That was surprising.
I lost. Yeah, we can go with this. This is a comment. We can respond to it. In the real world, we have trade-offs. There are no perfect solutions. We have to work with what's actually feasible at the moment and take pragmatic steps. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I think we have to be careful to also remain libertarian and make libertarian arguments and go in the direction of more freedom and not more government.
I agree with that. I agree with both of those statements. I thought there was one that was a question. I'm trying to find it, but I cannot find it right now. Maybe it was one you already read. Why pick the size of the Department of Education? Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, the ultimate answer is, which, there's enough agreement there, which they probably could have even talked about more, that like we agree on the end points. We just disagree on sometimes like how do we get there, to some extent. Like Dave's not saying my ideal society is one in which we have a state and it decides immigration policy. He's more like, because we have a state that deals with it, that just decides immigration policy, like what's the least bad option until we can tear the whole thing down.
More government. That was the answer.
All
Sorry.
right,
Just saying the obvious here.
So this episode has been a little bit of a highlight in terms of what libertarian Christians believe. Sometimes what libertarian Christians can disagree on. But if you see in the background of Doug's bookshelf, you'll see there's a new book which came out recently. You can't quite read it on his screen right now, but it's what libertarian Christians believe. It's kind of a you could say it's like a companion book to the other one next to him, Faith Seeking Freedom.
It's the same size, same glossy cover.
Yes. That one's less of a, going like issue by issue, sort of like in a question answer format, and think more of a that's more of like a more of a zoomed out kind of, if you want to say, like it's like more low resolution, whereas Faith Seeking Freedom's a bit more.
Yeah, no, I can describe it here. Can I put this in the chat or in the wait? If I put it in the chat, will it? There we go. You can get it here. If it will send. Basically, what it is what do libertarian Christians believe, and it is a short book. It's about, I want to say, 85 pages on the core values. So a few years ago, we came up with some core values that we believe every libertarian Christian should be able to affirm, no matter what creedal denomination. And we decided to kind of expand upon that. Earlier this year, we kind of made a decision of, hey, let's expand upon this and create a book. And so we used that to create a short booklet. It's not that expensive to get on Amazon. You can order it from libertarianchristians.com as well. I posted a link there. It looks like it's showing up on everywhere but Facebook. Thanks, Mark. So it's a primer on what libertarian Christians believe. Faith Seeking Freedom is like, okay, I'm not convinced. I've got a lot of questions. Or if you're a libertarian Christian, you have a lot of people who do have questions for you. There you go. Thank you. So what do libertarian Christians believe? Nice purple, nice libertarian cover.
Yeah.
It's got my name on the cover because I led the charge for the project.
And then, of course, and I think you guys have heard me talk about these already, but just to remind you that you can also get House Divided. You can also go to, I think, housedividedbook.com to find that as well.
Yep.
But I will be having Benj on sometime in the next couple weeks. I think I don't know if we're going to do it live or if we're going to record and publish it, but it'll be like second week of June. So keep an eye open for that. And of course, Cody has his book, Anarchist Anabaptist, and you recently had him on for his other book that he just published, The Pocket Anabaptist, which was, it's just, I'm going to have to write like 4 books on Reformed theology next year just to counteract all this Anabaptist takeover that's going on here. all these Anabaptists, this is the problem when you invite Anabaptists into your private property, and it's the strongest argument for closed borders I can think of.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's a good thing I'm in charge of publishing because, I'll have to see about that, Jacob.
Yeah. All right.
We'll see who owns the property and if you can get in, right?
Well, it's already predestined what's going to happen, and it has been predestined that you're going to publish it. So you have no free will.
Well, then I guess I have no choice.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in with us tonight. It's been a lot of fun interacting with you guys in the comments, and everything. I guess my closing thought would be that, I think the way you put it, Doug, is very succinct and important. We have to figure out how to. I think my primary motivator is having one foot firmly in both those things. One in libertarian principles, and one in, we're in the real world. How do we move and navigate it? And it does seem like these conversations, these debates are more important than ever because there's too many libertarians, I think, who get too caught up putting both feet in one or the other. And I think if they're both in theory, then, you're going to be really good at theory, but like, are you moving the needle? And if they're both in the world, then you can kind of lose that North Star. So I think, having a foot in both is kind of important. So any closing thoughts, Doug?
No, man. I think you said it great. I will close with thanking you for having me on, and this has been fun.
Awesome. All right, thanks everybody. I don't know if I have any more No more live streams this week, but I think there's 2 next week. So make sure you're subscribed. Give this video a thumbs up wherever you like it, or again, audio 5-star reviews always help. Libertarianchristians.com. And as I always conclude by saying, live at peace, live for Christ, and take care.